is this one super popular anime in Japan, and it's so popular that even 4-year-olds who have definitely never watched it, because why should they watch an anime about demon slayers, have a favorite character and obviously play tag with them. Like my niece is coming regularly to me and say things like, I'm Nezuko and you're Tanjiro, run! And I'm kind of like, Tanjiro is not supposed to run from Nezuko. You see, they're actually siblings. She always never watched it. But I thought, for a little present, I'm going to make a Haori for her favorite character. In case you're here for the first time, my name is Billy Matsunaga and I'm a fully trained and certified kimono teacher and stylist. So what I actually like about this anime is actually a few things. And the first one is actually that every character has a Haori in a very specific design, which first, what I like about this anime is that those designs have their origin in a very traditional Japanese design. Which means when you watch an anime and you have a favorite character, you usually start researching about the design as well. Which is actually already one step into getting involved in the kimono things. The next thing is that those Haori, especially as they're usually sold as patterns in Japanese fabric stores, because obviously a lot of kids want to wear their favorite character's Haori. They're super easy to make, especially when you don't make a fuss out of it, like I did in one of my previous videos. And everything that gets people back into sewing is already a win for me. And lastly, we all know that Japanese are not too much into kimono anymore. They do wear it for formal occasions, but only women. Kimono totally vanished from the daily wardrobe. And everything that keeps people back into, let's learn about kimono, let's wear a Haori, makes me so incredibly happy that I'm actually very happy what is happening right now with this anime. I think that's called in English Demon Slayer, and I will refer to it in as Kimetsu because that's a Japanese name or short. So I'm really happy what Kimetsu is actually doing in those terms. So I thought, as my niece also has a favorite character, why not making a Haori for her and giving it to her as a Christmas present, which I probably will I will give it to her probably already this weekend, because I want to see her in it and I want her to wear it for kindergarten and tell all her friends in kindergarten that Billy made this Haori, and all her friends will actually go back home and tell their parents that Yuka has this beautiful Haori from, oh my, what was the character's? Kocho Shinobu was her name. Has this Kocho Shinobu Haori. Kocho Shinobu Haori. And Billy made that. And all the parents will be like, who is Billy? That's the ultimate goal of this video. Kocho Shinobu is also popular enough so they do sell her fabric as a print. I got that because where is like the pretty side? This is the pretty side. So I am not as much of a cosplayer that I would actually paint this. I'm too lazy. So I'm gonna use this one. It was also incredibly cheap. And my niece is also like a super tiny 4-year-old. So this is gonna be really interesting because this pattern is actually pretty big. We'll see how that will work out, but anyway. So I think let's just get started with this, and I show you the design I have tried to prepare, which is like an awful sketch. So this is my super weird little sketch. I don't even know why I'm showing this to you. Yeah, I made a sketch for me to wrap around my head around how I should cut out the fabric later. I hope it's gonna work this way. And yeah, this is how the Haori is gonna look like. The fabric itself has this pattern only on one side, which is awful because actually this pattern has to be on back and front, this ombre pattern thingy here. So I have to make a shoulder seam here, which is so inaccurate and I already hate it, but I have to work with what I have. I'm not going to paint the fabric, I just can say it again. So usually it would be one piece and then flipped over. A seam here on top is not a kimono. I repeat myself, that is not a kimono, but yeah. And I will have to rewatch the anime again because I'm not sure if they all have a center back seam. Usually kids' kimonos don't have a center back seam, so be aware that you don't even have to fake it, because usually kids' kimonos up to a certain age do not have a center back seam. She is 4 years old, she shouldn't have a center back seam. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna include one. I'm just gonna rewatch the anime, make sure if they have actual center back seam or not. Okay, and also this fabric here has only stops with the pink, and in the original there's actually still a black strip here on bottom. I thought I'm gonna fake that with black lace ruffles. So I got this beautiful lace, which is actually incredibly good quality, and I actually don't want to use it, but it's gonna be fine. She's gonna get her lace, which I'm gonna ruffle up because she's a 4-year-old, so I want to have it still a little 4-year-old like. And I also thought it's gonna be cute to have a few shiny sparkly sequins on it that I actually also purchased online in a flea market application here in Japan because I could not find any of those. And yeah, so it's gonna be a little 4 years old appropriate design, I hope. So let's get started. I spread out the fabric on the floor. Before I could mark out anything, I reassured myself of the center back seam. I had to look for good footage. It was about the 25th episode, I think. And yes, there was a center back seam. So I started with marking out all the pieces I needed. And it took me forever. I was so tired after this, but also happy because it seemed to work out. So my sleeves are over there, and one main piece with one back piece, and right now 2 front pieces I'm gonna sew together here with a French seam. And I decided not to make a center back seam because I actually was hoping that I would have then enough fabric left over to have also this pattern here on the collar, which turns out not to be enough. We'll see if I can make something with this. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, let's start sewing this together first. So I have turned those 3 pieces into one big piece, and I also trimmed the sleeves. I had to trim the pink side and the white side to have like a nice pattern. That is why, because I'm really bad at picturing this, that is why I cut it out bigger in the beginning, and after I have laid it together like this, I measured it again and did some calculations, and this is how it turned out with this exact placement of the pattern on the sleeves. In the end, I also decided I will insert a center back seam here because I will add lace onto the sleeves, which makes the sleeves longer, which means I can lose a little width here because it's actually her exact measurements. So a center back seam will do the thing, which is perfect. Plus, that is actually what you usually should do. Usually when you make a kimono, I know I did this not in my tutorial, so I will tell you now. Usually you have more Sondey, which is the width of the sleeves, and less kata, which is the shoulder width here. And you do this because you want to show your shoulders narrower, and you usually what you don't have in the kata hub is what you add onto the sleeves when you can do this. This time I have more than plenty of fabric and more than plenty of width, so that's what I'm going for. So now we'll finish off the sleeves, and then I will sew together the two sides here onto here, which is only like 10 centimeter, not even a 10 centimeter seam, so this will be finished quite easily. So I faked the center back seam by sewing in a pleat on the back. I pressed it down and folded the front panels onto the back and pinned them on. Wrong side on wrong side first, because I wanted to create a French seam. And then I sewed the side seams. I pressed the seams and cut the seam allowance into half. And when I pinned right side on right side, I remembered that I should have not cut off the seam allowance before sewing the sleeves on. Look at me, super angry at myself, because I couldn't follow my own tutorial. Well, we have to accept our flaws, right? As frustrated as I was, I moved on to the sleeves and marked out the seam allowance. Because I decided that I was already confused enough and machine sewing would only make it worse, so I sewed the sleeves by hand. Thanks to Unshin, this didn't even take 10 minutes. Then I finished off the side with the sleeve opening by hand too. After that, I aligned the main part and the sleeves, wrong side showing. Grab the top of both and put the sleeve into the main piece. Because I had cut off the seam allowance of the main piece, I could not align edge on edge and had the sleeves peek out a little. I pinned this together and sewed it. After pressing the seam, I cut off the extent seam allowance of the sleeve. Turned it inside out and sewed the sleeves and side seams again to finish the French seam. If anyone wonders, yes, this time I attached the sleeves fully again. I assume my niece will run around in this, and I wanted to minimize the openings she could get caught. I thought I'm gonna finish this in one day and I didn't. Okay, so this is how we come so far. I think it's pretty darn cute. And what I'm probably gonna do off camera tonight is just making rolled hem on the bottom here, and then I'm gonna talk to you tomorrow to make the collar and ruffles and also put on the sequences. So talk to you tomorrow. Night. Good morning. It's a very cloudy day today. Anyway, I've been working yesterday night a little bit more on the Haori. I have not done a lot, but I'm gonna show you what I've done. Okay, so I have done a rolled hem, as I said. It's not really nice. I do not care because I'm gonna add ruffles with this lace anyway, so it's gonna be fine like this. And over that I'm gonna put on sequences. I have sorted them. I sorted the golden ones out because they did not really match into the colors I wanted for this project. Okay, and I'm not sure if this will work out, but I tried to make a collar from the scraps of fabric I still had left over. And I made a tentsugi here, which means on the top of the collar, it's gonna be here where the center back seam is, you have a seam where you actually just put two fabrics together. So I'm gonna put this on and we're gonna see if it's long enough, because as I said, it's just scraps of fabric that I messed up when cutting. So let's just move on and ignore this problem. So first of all, I'm gonna cut off this excess from the fabric here, and I'm gonna pin the collar on, as always, probably off camera, because it's me just cursing all the time. A lot of people, by the way, also ask me about men's haori, what is different with men's and female haori. I think the biggest difference is that you don't have a big opening on the back. Let me start over again. So usually women's kimono, you have a lowered back collar, which means everything you wear over this need a lowered back collar as well. That is why haori usually have a big lowered back collar, which is usually the dip you do into the center back seam when you make a haori as usual out of two back panels. So don't sew it up all the way, you'd leave a few centimeters open. And that part is actually called kurikoshi in Japanese. And men's kimono and children's kimono don't have that. So they don't have a kurikoshi. When you want to say it super precisely, they have about a kurikoshi about 1 centimeter, because you have seam allowance on the top, which is about a centimeter. And that will become a little bit of a dip in the back collar, which is a little bit of a kurikoshi. But usually for men's kimono and kids kimono, just remember they don't have a kurikoshi. And women's kimono need a kurikoshi. So when you ever plan to make a haori that will sit on top of normal clothing, make sure not to add a kurikoshi, because the kurikoshi is the thing that actually messes up the look and makes it look not so nice. That's why in my how to mix Western clothing with kimono, I told you to pull down the back a little when you wear a haori over normal clothing to kind of balance out the kurikoshi, because women's haori are not meant to sit directly against your back neck here. Now I hope that made a little bit of sense. So that is actually the biggest difference I did in this haori with my how to make a haori video. And I sewed on the collar. I redid it 3 times and it still sits super funky. It's my second attempt on a kimono item for kids and I just can't get the color right somehow. But I'm fine with it for now, I guess. Anyway, after I had pressed the seam again, I also folded and pressed in the seam allowance on the unsewn other side. I folded the collar in half and pinned the other side on the first collar seam to cover it up. This time I decided to blind stitch the collar on with unshin. Blind stitching with unshin is very difficult and I never really let me practice it because I want to finish my projects fast. When I blind stitch with unshin, I always have to turn and check if the stitches are showing on the front. I very often have to pull back the needle a little to unstitch, and this takes forever. But for this project I wanted to invest some time for practice, because when I can blind stitch with unshin properly one day, my kimono sewing in general will be so much faster. So sometimes you just have to invest in yourself, I guess. After that, the haori was finished. So I could start to make all the extras, starting with black lace ruffles. I passed the lace through the machine with very big and loose stitches, so I could gather the lace up to half of its length and pin it onto the bottom hem and sleeves. I sewed this on very carefully by machine. And after sewing on about 200 sequins by hand, that, by the way, took me 2 nights. That's why I don't have any footage. The Kocho Shinobu haori for my 4-year-old niece was complete. Hello, it's a few days later. My niece is coming over this morning, so I can give this to her. We'll see if she likes it. They're gonna be here every moment. We already pulled out the tree yesterday. A little bit too early for my taste, but however, let's put this present under the tree. Okay, this is looking good. And my little hedgehog equipment over there. She, by the way, liked the tree very much yesterday evening.よいしょ、ゆかちゃんおいで。
キリちゃんとこ行って。
わかる？
クリスマスバージョンになってました。
出してみて。
見たことある？
噛まないよ。
素晴らしい。いや、可愛い。めっちゃ可愛いんだけど。
じゃじゃん。
ちょっと
映ってないっしょ。
知ってる。
じゃあ見てごらん。
ほら。あ、嬉しい。恥ずかしいけど嬉しいのが見せたくない。どうですか？どうですか？大丈夫ですか？これで。これしのぶさんですか？本当？よかったね。
チャンネル登録よろしくお願いします。
言わないな。なんて？もう一回。まみこさん。
チャンネル登録よろしくお願いします。ゆかなちゃんも言って。
じゃあゆかちゃん言わない。よかった、わかった、わかった。今日は言わないね。